For the first 10 seconds, nobody in the stadium understood what they were seeing. 15,000 people had been singing, dancing, sweating through the heat of the Kingston night. And then everything froze. A man was climbing onto the stage. A gun was in his hand. And Bob Marley was only a few feet away. People in the front rows gasped. Security shouted but didn't move fast enough. The band kept playing for 2 more bars until the drummer finally saw the gun and his sticks fell from his hands. The stadium lights caught the shine of the barrel, and suddenly the energy of joy and unity turned into something sharp and electric. Marley lifted his head and saw the man clearly. Winston Clark. People in Trenchtown whispered his name like a warning. He was the kind of man whose shadow could silence a street. The kind of man who built his power on fear. And now he was stepping toward Bob with rage in his eyes and a gun in his shaking hand. The crowd turned to stone. Winston stopped at center stage, his chest rising and falling in hard breaths. His voice hit the microphone as he yelled directly at Bob. Stop singing this unity foolishness. You're making our people weak. You're breaking everything we built. The words echoed across the entire stadium. Bob didn't move, didn't step back, didn't look for help. He just studied Winston's face like he was reading something only he could understand. Winston raised the gun higher. Security hesitated. One wrong move and a bullet would fly. People in the crowd covered their mouths. Some held their friends' hands. Others prayed under their breath. Bob exhaled once. Then he said the 6 words that made the entire stadium stop breathing. If you want to shoot me, shoot. The audience's gasp rolled like thunder. Even Winston flinched. Bob took a slow step forward, as if he were walking into a warm ocean instead of toward a loaded gun. You can kill my body, but not this message, Bob said. Winston's jaw tightened. His eyes flickered. His hand trembled. The crowd wasn't sure what they were witnessing. Courage? Madness? A man accepting death? Or something deeper, something they couldn't name? Bob moved even closer. 2 feet now. 1. The entire stadium leaned forward as if the closer Bob got, the closer the truth behind this moment would reveal itself. Something about the way Bob looked at Winston wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was something Winston had never seen in all the years he spent building a life around violence. And that emotion, whatever it was, hit Winston harder than any bullet he ever fired. His hand shook. Bob touched his shoulder, and this is where the moment twisted into something. Nobody expected asterisk when Bob's hand touched Winston's shoulder. People in the stadium stopped breathing again. A security guard near the speaker tower whispered, "Please don't move, Bob. Please don't move." But Bob stood there like the gun didn't exist at all. Winston's eyes darted around the stadium, as if suddenly realizing how many people were watching him. 15,000 faces. 15,000 voices that had been singing a love song only minutes earlier. Now all of them stared at him like he was holding time hostage. He expected screams. He expected curses. He expected the crowd to demand his death. But instead, silence. Not anger, not rage. Just pure, stunned silence. Winston swallowed hard. His throat felt tight. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "Stop singing this peace nonsense. You making the youths weak. You messing with everything we built." Bob tilted his head slightly, studying him the way a doctor studies a wound before touching it. "Brother," Bob said softly, "you think unity is weakness. But tell me something, has violence ever given you peace?" The words cut Winston deeper than any knife. His hand tightened around the gun, knuckles whitening. He felt something he hadn't felt in years. Shame. The lights on the stage washed his face in a harsh glare, revealing sweat dripping from his temples. It wasn't heat. It was fear he had never allowed himself to feel in public. Winston lived his whole life by one rule: never show weakness, not even for a second. But here he was, Shaking in front of the one man who refused to fear him, Bob took another step, the gun now only inches from his chest. Marcus, Bob's road manager backstage, felt his stomach collapse. He whispered into the walkie-talkie, "Do not move. Do not touch Winston. If you rush him, Bob is dead." The entire stadium existed in one breath, one blink. Winston's jaw clenched. He pushed the gun closer to Bob's chest until metal touched fabric. Bob didn't flinch. "Brother," Bob said again. "You think you're here to kill me, but you came here because you hurting and you tired, and you don't know what to do with all that pain." Winston's eyes widened. How did Bob see that? How did he know? How did he speak the words Winston had kept buried for years? Bob leaned in closer, his voice low enough that only Winston and the front rows could hear. "I know that pain because I lived it too. We come from the same streets, brother. Same hunger, same fear, same nights hearing gunshots and pretending we didn't." Winston felt the air leave his lungs. Nobody ever talked to him like that. Nobody ever saw him like that. He blinked rapidly, and for the first time, his grip loosened, but then Winston caught something over Bob's shoulder. Movement. A guard slowly creeping toward the stage stairs. Winston snapped back into survival mode. The gun rose again higher, shaking violently. "Back off, all of you, back off, I'll shoot him. I swear I'll shoot him," people screamed. Mothers held their children. The back rows began pushing, creating ripples of panic. Bob lifted one hand gently without turning around. No. One move let the brother breathe. The crowd froze again. Even the guard stopped like he'd been turned to stone. Winston's breathing grew louder, harsher, more frantic. He wasn't fully in control anymore. This wasn't a man with a plan. This was a man drowning in his own emotions. Bob stepped closer again, just 1 inch. And then Winston whispered something that shifted everything. "You don't know what they told me about you. You don't know what they want me to do tonight." Bob's eyes narrowed slightly. Something dangerous flickered behind Winston's expression. This wasn't just anger. This wasn't just drunken rage. There was a reason Winston came here armed. Someone sent him. Someone wanted this to happen. And the truth behind that reason, the truth Winston was about to confess, would change the entire meaning of this moment. Bob leaned in slowly. "What did they tell you, brother?" Winston looked at him, eyes filled with fear and conflict, and whispered, "They want you gone, Bob. They want the music gone. They want the unity gone. They say you're the real danger, not me." Bob's face hardened. The stadium held its breath, because Winston wasn't just pointing a gun. He was carrying someone else's message. Asterisk, when the crowd realized Bob Marley was not stepping back from the gun, the entire venue froze in a strange mix of fear and disbelief. Security stayed low, fans covered their mouths, and the lights above the stage trembled like they were reacting to the tension in the air. The gang leader kept the gun raised, but something in his eyes had changed. His hand was shaking, and the anger on his face was turning into something else. Something people in the front row noticed first. Bob took another slow step forward. His voice steady, warm, almost father-like. He told the man he didn't come here to fight him or shame him. He said he came here to sing for the people who needed hope more than anything. He said he wasn't afraid of dying in front of them because love was bigger than fear, bigger than bullets, bigger than every enemy a man carries inside his heart. The gang leader swallowed hard. He lifted his chin like he was trying to stay tough, but his voice cracked when he warned Bob not to come closer. Bob ignored the warning and kept moving until he was only a few feet away. The crowd saw something they would talk about for decades. Bob Marley standing inches from a loaded gun, looking directly into the eyes of a man ready to pull the trigger. Bob asked him one question. A quiet, simple question that somehow cut deeper than any threat. He asked him if this was really the path he wanted his life to follow. The man froze again. His grip loosened just enough that the gun dipped toward the floor. Bob didn't move. He waited for the man to decide. Slowly, the gang leader's breathing. got heavier like the weight of everything he had done in his life finally pressed down at once. He lowered the gun fully but didn't drop it. His jaw was tight, his eyes wet. He didn't look like a man anymore. He looked like someone who had never been given a chance to be anything else. Bob reached out and placed a hand on the man's shoulder. The entire crowd gasped because nobody expected that kind of bravery. The man flinched but didn't step back. For a moment it felt like time had stopped between them. Bob told him every person has a good side still alive inside them, even if the world tried to bury it. He told him once a man lets the darkness take over, he becomes a prisoner of his own choices, and Bob didn't want him to die that way. The man took a long breath, his arms shaking as he tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. Bob guided him a step away from the center of the stage so the spotlight wasn't blinding him. He wanted the man to breathe like a human again, not a target stuck under a burning white light. The audience stayed silent, trembling from the shock of seeing violence melt into something strange and unfamiliar. Bob's band members didn't move. They trusted him. They waited for his cue. But inside every one of them there was fear, sharp and cold. They were staring at a man who walked in with a gun, and yet Bob was speaking to him like an older brother, trying to pull someone back from a cliff edge. Bob asked him why he came. The man didn't answer at first. He looked around the venue at thousands of eyes watching him with terror, curiosity, judgment, and sadness all mixed together. Finally whispered that he didn't come to kill Bob because of any personal reason. He said other people pushed him to do it. People who hated how Bob united different neighborhoods and gangs, people who feared Bob's influence more than his music. He said if he didn't do this, they would come for him. It wasn't bravery that brought him on stage. It was fear. Bob nodded slowly like he understood too well what fear can force a man to become. He told him fear is a liar and the people who control others through fear are the weakest ones in the world. He said walking on stage with a gun wasn't the man's choice. It was a borrowed decision forced on him by cowards hiding behind him. The man looked down at his gun again, his fingers trembling around the cold steel. His voice cracked as he said he didn't want to live like this anymore. Bob stepped even closer and gently pushed the gun toward the floor with the back of his hand. The man didn't resist. The gun lowered until his arm hung uselessly at his side. The crowd didn't clap. Nobody moved. The air was too heavy, too fragile. One loud sound could have broken whatever miracle was happening on that stage. The gang leader's shoulders finally dropped like he had been carrying the weight of 10 lifetimes. Bob told him he could still choose a different path, and the man whispered he didn't know how. Bob smiled a tired, sad smile. He told him he didn't need to know right away. He just needed to stop walking toward destruction long enough to see another road appear. Then Bob said something that stunned everyone close enough to hear it. He asked the man if he trusted him. The man nodded, though he didn't know why. Bob took his hand and guided him gently toward the side of the stage. The audience watched as the gang leader followed him like a child lost in a world too loud, too cruel, too confusing to navigate alone. Bob stopped near the edge of the platform and told him to stay there, breathe, and don't move until the fear inside him settled. The man agreed quietly, and for the first time since stepping on that stage, he looked human again. Bob then turned back toward the center of the stage. The spotlight returned to him, slowly, hesitant, like even the lights were afraid to break the moment. The crowd was still silent, waiting for his next move, waiting to understand how music could feel so close to violence, yet still hold so much peace. Bob lifted the mic. He inhaled deeply, preparing to speak. Not sing, just speak. And the entire arena leaned forward to hear what he would say after surviving a moment that could have ended everything. Asterisk. Bob stood in the center of the stage, holding the mic like it carried the weight of everything that just happened. The crowd waited for him to speak. Their fear had turned into a strange, quiet hope. Bob looked at them and then at the gang leader standing in the shadows of the stage, Trembling but alive, Bob told the crowd they had all witnessed something bigger than music. He said a man came with a gun because the world taught him violence was the only language he had left. But tonight he saw that even the hardest heart can still change when someone shows it a different way. Bob said if one man can drop the gun, then maybe an entire generation can drop the hate that keeps destroying them. The crowd finally breathed. Some people cried. Some people whispered prayers. The gang leader wiped his face with both hands trying to hide it, but the tears still fell. Bob walked back to him one last time and gently took the gun from his hand. No force. No fear. The man let it go like he had been waiting his whole life for someone to help him release it. Bob placed the gun on the edge of the stage and told the man he was free to choose the rest of his life starting from this second. The man nodded slowly like a heavy chain had just unlocked inside him. Security approached, but Bob raised his hand and told them to step back. He didn't want the moment poisoned by punishment. He wanted it to end in peace. The man stepped off the stage, quietly disappearing into the crowd that parted for him like a curtain. No boos, no shouts. Just silence as he walked away carrying nothing but the chance Bob had given him. Bob returned to the mic and smiled softly. A tired, brave smile that told everyone he was still here, still standing, still unbroken. He lifted his guitar and struck one simple, warm chord that filled the entire venue with a feeling no fear could replace. The crowd erupted not from excitement but from gratitude. Bob said one last line before the music began. Again, he said, a man with a gun tried to end the night, but love finished it instead, and with that he started the next song while thousands of voices rose around him, turning the moment into something unforgettable and the story into a legend that would be told long after he was gone.